Teruvan Saranai. Hi, this preaching or this discussion is for those who only listen in English or those who only understand in English, because it's very, very difficult for me to put subtitles in a Sinhala Dham discussion in English. I decided to do this in English as well. I will do this, I will summarize the same Sinhala one in English so that you get the same idea. I might use a lot of Sinhala words, but I will try to explain them, because sometimes it's very hard for me to find a similar English word for the same meaning, but I will try to explain as much as I can. So today's discussion, I'm going to talk about two concepts. One is dukkha and the second one is dukkha arya satya. So dukkha is the suffering, and dukkha arya satya is like the comprehending the noble suffering. So comprehending the noble suffering and the suffering are two different concepts. The suffering is something that anyone can understand. You don't need any wisdom to understand the suffering, because everyone suffers. If you ask a person who doesn't have food to eat, who doesn't have clothes to wear, who doesn't have shelter, who doesn't have who's sick, who doesn't who lacks anything, basically they are suffering. Who doesn't have education, maybe, so they are suffering. But that suffering is not the same as the wisdom that you obtain by comprehending them. So that's what we are going to look at in today's discussion, because they say for someone to understand the noble truth of suffering, I'm not 100% sure as to whether these words are the exact words that I should be using, but it's the dukkha arya satya that I'm referring to. For someone to understand the dukkha arya satya, or the noble truth of suffering, this has to be explained by a Lord Buddha. A Lord Buddha has to be born, and it has to be brought into the attention of the normal people by a Lord Buddha. Otherwise, the normal people won't understand this. So let's see why this is so important and why this is different from the normal suffering that anyone can understand. If you take a dog, or if you take an animal, or if you take if you think about health, there are people or there are creatures who suffer all the time. Though they are suffering, but that's, you feel that with some attachment to the body. This suffering comes from a bodily feeling. It's got nothing to do with the intelligence. It's got nothing to do with the wisdom. Anyone can understand this because you can feel it. It's a feeling that you feel from your body. So that is the suffering I'm talking about. So this suffering anyone can understand. You don't need any sort of intelligence, or you don't need a wisdom for anyone to understand this. This is not the noble truth of suffering that we should understand, or a Buddhist person should understand. So this, you need to make sure you understand the difference between these two. So this is the first one. So this is what anyone can understand. Now we'll move on to the real noble truth of suffering. So how do we understand? Let's take an example to understand this in more detail. In Lord Buddha's time, there was this person who had a very, very attached son. He was really attached to this son. He was in real love with this son, and the son died. This person was very, very sad. He was running around like a maniac, didn't know what to do, crying maybe, screaming maybe, with sorrow. So he was telling everyone, I lost my son. This was the most valuable gift I had. This was the most important thing I had. He was the most precious thing I had. I lost him, and I'm so sad. So people were saying, oh, Lord Buddha is in this place. You can probably go and speak to Lord Buddha, and maybe you can get some advice, and maybe you can reduce your suffering or your sorrow. So this person ran into where Lord Buddha was, and then sat down beside Lord Buddha and said, this is what happened. I had a son. He was so attached to me. This was the most precious thing I had. He was the most valuable thing I had. I lost him, and I don't know what to do. I'm suffering a lot. So then Lord Buddha said, so the most precious things are what gives us the most sufferings. So this, when this person heard this, he didn't understand how can the most precious things or the most valuable things give us the most suffering. That can't be true, because the most precious things are the ones, or in other words, what you love most gives the most suffering. So this was a puzzle to this man. This man didn't understand this, but he didn't question. He just left. He was not happy. He was very frustrated. He was angry, and he was sad. He just left, and he was just mumbling. And then when he was walking, he came across some drunk guys, and then they were like, what are you mumbling about? And then this person said, I lost my beloved son, and I'm so worried and I'm so sad. But then when I went to Lord Buddha, he said that the loved ones are the ones who gives you the most suffering. How can that be true? And then these guys were like, no, that can't be right. Loved ones always give us pleasure. They give us happiness. This can't be true. And then this word spread across the whole country, and then everyone got to know this, saying that loved ones gives the pleasure. So that's what everyone agreed on. But they said, but Lord Buddha is saying loved ones give us the suffering. So this went to the king's hands, or the king got to know this. The king was Kosol. So the King Kosol was talking about this as well, and then so Mallika Devi was also there. So Mallika Devi also thought, oh, that can't be true. The loved ones always give pleasure and happiness. So who said this? And then the king was like, this was said by Lord Gautama or Gautama Buddha, and that can't be right. But if Lord Buddha said, then it has to be right, said Mallika Devi. So the king was not happy about this. King said, you are like the Brahmanas, you just agree to whatever your teacher says. Doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong, get out of my sight. And then he chased his wife away. So the Mallika Devi went away, but she had it in mind. So she wanted to find out what this is, and then she sent one of the ministers to see Lord Buddha, and she asked him to go and speak to Lord Buddha and ask what this is about. Ask him why and how does the loved ones give suffering. So the minister sat down beside Lord Buddha and asked, okay, what we know of or what we understand is that loved ones always give us pleasure and happiness. How does the loved ones give us a suffering? Then Lord Buddha said, loved one always gives the suffering. How can that be? And then Lord Buddha asked, okay, do you have a son? He said, yes, I have a son. I'm very close to him. Where does he live? He lives in this place that was far away from him. So then Lord Buddha asked, okay, imagine someone said, oh, he has died. How would you feel? And he was like, oh, don't even mention something like that. That's ridiculous. Don't even say something like that. I can't even bear that. I can't even think about something like that. And then Lord Buddha asked a few more questions. Do you have a wife? Where is your wife? What if someone says your wife has died or is sick? I'll be terrified. I'll be so sad. Okay. And then Lord Buddha asked, okay, do you know people that you don't like or people that you are not attached to? Of course. There are many people like that. Okay. So what happens if they are sick or if they die? It's like, why wouldn't I even bother? I don't care about them. And I won't be sad if someone else died. Okay. So now, do you understand what I'm saying, what I'm talking about? And then he was like, yes, now I understand. So whatever we are attached with or whatever we love so much gives the most suffering. So another example to understand this is by if you take a piece of paper, draw 3 columns, and then if you put one column, the first one, as the most loved ones. So if you number from 1 to 10 and you put the most loved person on top and the 10th one at number 10, and if you list them, and then in the second column you put the most valuable people in the world, and then you list the 10, and then in the third one you list from 1 to 10 if people in this world die, who would you suffer most? So you name the 10, you number the 10 according to the suffering you get. So if you look at the 3 columns or if you look at the 3 lists, they will be identical pretty much, because whoever you loved most will end up giving you the most suffering, and that will be the same person who is the most valuable person to you. So therefore this has a relationship, and it's a direct relationship. So the more you're attached, the more you are in love, the more you suffer. So this is what you need to understand, and this is something that not many people will understand, and this is the truth. This is the noble truth of the suffering. This is what you need to understand. So this is what happens when someone goes behind something thinking that it's going to give pleasure and happiness, but it's going to end up in a suffering. So this is what Buddhism is about. This is what the noble truth is about. So this is the difference between the dukkha or the suffering and dukkhara satya, the noble truth of suffering. So this is the most important thing that you need to understand. And on top of that, for example, another example is like if you want to, anyone who does fishing, you for you to catch a fish, you need a bait. So without a bait, you won't get a fish. You won't be able to catch a fish. So similarly, the bait comes as pleasure and happiness at first. So you attach to what you see as pleasure, what you see as good, what you see as really nice, really beautiful, and then you end up with the suffering because of that bait. So this is what you need to understand. This is what you need to focus on. Once you understand this, you understand the Dhamma. Once you understand the Dhamma, you look at things and you think twice. You think, okay, this is, if I go behind this, I will end up in a suffering. So therefore you have to proceed with caution, basically, until you comprehend the Dhamma totally until you become Arihat. You will have some sort of attachment with some things in the world. So, but you will proceed with caution, and the suffering you get out of these will be far less than a normal person who won't have any idea about this. So they will die, they will kill themselves, they will die, they will be so sad, they won't be able to bear sometimes the suffering because of a loss. But a person who understands this will understand that it's going to be jati jara marana sukha parideva dukkha domanasa. So anything will end up in the dukkha domanasa, as in the suffering. So this is what you need to understand. Once you understand this, most of the suffering will reduce to a vast level, and then you'll be left with what you're attached to, and then you will reduce the attachments day by day, and you will understand it's the attachment from the mind, it's the attachment from your mind, it's that is important. There is no other attachment you can do anyway. There is only one attachment, and that's you're attaching with your mind. So this attachment you have to understand. The more you're attached, the more you suffer. The less you're attached, the less you suffer. So you can compare this, you can look at this practically by applying this to anything you're attached with. So the more you're attached, the more you think about it, the more you worry about things. The less you're attached, the less you worry about things, the less you suffer. I hope you understood this. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask the questions in the comments below. And if you have any things that needs explanation, please let me know. I will try to explain them in the future Dham discussions. And hope to have another discussion next week about another topic. Until then, Terun Sannai.